Welcome to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and this episode features the account of Edward Porter Alexander, the commander of the artillery that was intended to soften up the Union line before Pickett's charge was launched. This account gives a unique perspective, not of an infantry commander or overall commander, but of an artillery commander, and how he viewed the attack. The signal for the opening of the cannonade would be given by Longstreet himself after the infantry brigades were all in position. A clump of trees in the enemy lines was pointed out to me as the proposed point of our attack, which I was incorrectly told was the cemetery of the town, and about 9 a.m. I began to revise our line and post it for the cannonade. The enemy very strangely interfered with only an occasional cannon shot, to none of which did we now reply, for it was easily in their power to drive us to cover or to exhaust our ammunition before our infantry column could be formed. I can only account for their allowing our visible preparations to be completed by supposing that they appreciated in what a trap we would find ourselves. Of Longstreet's 83 guns, 8 were left on our extreme right to cover our flank, and the remaining 75 were posted in an irregular line about 1,300 yards long, beginning in the peach orchard and ending near the northeast corner of Spangler Wood. While so engaged, General Pendleton offered me the use of 9 12-pound howitzers of Hill's Corps, saying that the Corps could not use guns of such short range. I gladly accepted, and went to receive the guns under command of Major Richardson. I placed them under cover close in rear of the foreman column, with orders to remain until sent for, intending to take them with the column when it advanced. A few hundred yards to the left and rear of my line began the artillery of the 3rd Corps under Colonel Walker. It was comprised of 60 guns extended on Seminary Ridge as far as the Hagerstown Road, and 2 Whitworth rifles located near a mile farther north on the same ridge. In this interval were located 20 rifle guns of the 2nd Corps under Colonel Carter. 4 more rifles of the same corps under Captain Graham were located about 1.5 miles northeast of Cemetery Hill. These 24 guns of the 2nd Corps were ordered to fire only solid shot as their fuses were unreliable. There remained unemployed of the 2nd Corps 25 rifles and 16 Napoleons, and of the 3rd Corps 15 12-pound howitzers. It is notable that of the 84 guns of the 2nd and 3rd Corps to be engaged, 80 were in the same line parallel to the position of the enemy, and 56 guns stood idle. It was a phenomenal oversight to not place these guns, and many beside, in and near the town to enfilade the shank of the fishhook and crossfire with the guns from the west. The Federal guns in position on their lines at the commencement of the cannonade were 166, and during it 10 batteries were brought up from the reserves, raising the number engaged to 220 against 172 used upon our side during the same time. The formation of our infantry lines consumed a long time, and the formation used was not one suited for such a heavy task. 6 brigades, say 10,000 men, were in the first line. 3 brigades were only in the second line, very much shorter on the left. It followed about 200 yards in the rear of the first. The remaining brigade, Wilcox's, posted in the rear of the right of the column, was not put in motion with the column, and being ordered forward 20 minutes or more later, was much too late to be of any assistance whatever. Both flanks of the assaulting column were in the air, and the left without any support in the rear. It was sure to crumble away rapidly under fire. No formation, however, could have been successful, and the light one doubtless suffered fewer casualties than one more compact and deeper would have had. A little before noon there sprung up upon our left a violent cannonade which was prolonged for fully half an hour, and has often been supposed to be a part of that ordered preceded Pickett's charge. It began between skirmishers in front of Hill's Corps over the occupation of a house. Hill's artillery first took part in it. It was said by his order. It was most unwise, as it consumed useless amount of ammunition, the lack of which was much felt in the subsequent fighting. Not a single gun of our corps fired a shot, nor did the enemy in our front. When the firing died out, entire quiet settled upon the field, extending even to the skirmishers in front, and also to the enemy's rear, whence behind their lines opposing us we had heard all the morning the noise of Johnson's combats. My 75 guns had all been carefully located and made ready for an hour. While the infantry brigades were still not yet in their proper positions, I was awaiting for the signal to come from Longstreet, when it occurred to me to send for the 9 howitzers under Richardson, that they might lead in the advance for a few hundred yards before coming into action. Only after the cannonade had opened did I learn that the guns had been removed and could not be found. It afterward appeared that Pendleton had withdrawn 4 of the guns, and Richardson with the other 5, finding himself in the line of the Federal fire during Hill's cannonade, had moved off to find cover. I made no complaint, believing that had these guns gone forward with the infantry, they must have been left upon the field, and perhaps have attracted a counter-stroke after the repulse of Pickett's charge. Meanwhile, some half hour or more before the cannonade began, I was startled by the receipt of a note from Longstreet as follows: "Colonel, if the artillery fire does not have the effect to drive off the enemy, or greatly demoralize him, so as to make our effort pretty certain, I would prefer that you should not advise Pickett to make the charge. I shall rely a great deal upon your judgment to determine the matter, and shall expect you to let General Pickett know when the moment offers." Until that moment, though I fully recognized the strength of the enemy's position, I had not doubted that we could carry it, in my confidence that Lee was ordering it. But here was a proposition that I should decide the question. Overwhelming reasons against the assault at once seemed to stare me in the face. General Wright of Anderson's division was standing with me. I showed him the letter and expressed my views. Evidently the cannonade was to be allowed to begin. Then the responsibility would be upon me to decide whether or not Pickett should charge. If not, we must return to Virginia to replenish ammunition, and the campaign would be a failure. I knew that our guns could not drive off the enemy, but I had a vague hope that with Ewell's and Hill's cooperation something might happen, though I knew little either of their positions, their opportunities, or their orders. I asked Wright, "What do you think of it? Is it as hard to get there as it looks?" He answered, "The trouble is not in going there. I went there with my brigade yesterday. There is a place where you can get breath and reform. The trouble is to stay there after you get there, for the whole Yankee army is there in a bunch." I failed to fully appreciate all that this might mean. The question seemed merely one of support, which was the provenance of General Lee. I had seen several of Hill's brigades forming to support Pickett, and had heard a rumor that Lee had spoken of a united attack upon the whole army. I determined to see Pickett and get an idea of his feelings. I did so, and finding him both cheerful and sanguine, I felt that if the artillery fire opened, Pickett must make the charge, but that Longstreet should know my views. So I wrote him as follows: "General, when our fire is at its best, I will advise General Pickett to advance.